It was 2 years to the day that I bought my son his first go-kart. I was very proud. It was right here that he took his first go at it, and well, it was soon to become apparent that there was a problem. But rather than me explain what that problem is, why don't I show you? What it needs, Marky, is a motor.
An engine. Vroom, vroom.
Yeah, you see, he wasn't able to pedal it, and as such I decided to make it motorized. So I did. I converted a car alternator and I made a battery, and off you go. The rest is history, and the video for that is on the screen. So there ends the story, except that recently there's another problem, and again, rather than me explain it to you, let me show you.
The other one. Yeah.
Yes, you see, my youngest son has taken quite a liking to this go-kart, and there's now a bit of a conflict with him wanting to go on it when Marky wants to go on it, and so on. So I'm left with no choice. I have to make another go-kart. So what's my plan? Well, there's three things I want from this new build. It's got to grow with Marky, so I want to see him still being using it when he's in his double figures, 10, 11. It'd be great. I'd like it to have full independent suspension. Now, why do I want that? Better, looks better, goes across field better, I guess. But yeah, just I think it's a bit tougher to do, but definitely cooler. And the last thing, I'd like to be able to lock the rear axle. Most simple go-karts have a single, solid axle, and the drive is to both rear wheels, but that's not much good on tarmac and solid ground. So you tend to lose maneuverability with that. So I'd like to be able to disconnect that and have them drive independently for roadish, well, not on the road, but tarmac, the car parks, that kind of stuff. So there's that. And of course it's going to be a battery operated again, so it's going to be electric. obviously if I'm going to have an independent rear suspension, I'm going to need some kind of drive shafts. Now this is probably the single biggest, the most complicated part of it for me, and that's why I'm going to start the build at the drive shafts, work out how big, how small I can make them, and then basically that will eventually tell me how wide it's going to be, and then from the width of it I can then determine how long by measuring my son out, fit him out, you know, lay him off, put him on a seat, and then so on. I want to start with the hardest part of this go-kart build, and the reason I want to do that is because it's the biggest unknown for me, and I've never done anything like this before. So when in doubt, I personally just tackle the hardest bit, and after that everything hopefully will fall into place. If I start building the frame and then I realise I've made it too narrow because I can't fit the drive shafts in, then I've sort of wasted an awful lot of time. So I'm starting with the drive shafts, and I'm starting with these are steering column UJ joints. So my plan is to use 2 on each drive shaft and connect them together with a piece of square box, so that the 2 shafts can actually they can slide. Basically the gap between them can increase and decrease depending on how the suspension traveling. So that's my sort of general idea. I think when the suspension goes bang up and down, I think you will find that this gap will just fluctuate slightly. So I thought, well, 2 bits of square box, one inside the other, should sort that out. So sorted. The hubs for the rear suspension, I'm using ordinary pillar blocks. Now one of these on its own for each axle won't be enough, because this bearing can actually move within inside the casing. So deciding that I'm going to put 2 of these together and bolt them, and then that will give me a very much like an ordinary car bearing, wheel bearing, and there's usually 2 components to it. It's 2 parts, and then that way that these two bearings can't move with the center shaft that will hold them in place. So I've got the 2 halves of the 2 pillar blocks, and I'm going to bolt them together. So then what? How do I actually mount the wishbones onto the hubs? Well, that's where these brackets come into play. It's just a bit of steel, flat steel, that I've cut out and cut a couple of pieces on and welded them to create the eyes. And then all my plan is to just bolt these together. So this is our hub, and through it I machined down a 17mm shaft and welded a flange on the end and cut out 3 holes which match the hole pan for the wheels. I'll insert some footage of the wishbone here, but ultimately this is what I end up with. And it's, after I've made the actual shape, I then basically welded some M12 nuts on the 2 ends, where I can then fit these, which are the adjustment, ultimately going to be the adjustment for the suspension, or partly for the camber. And then this mounts to the hub, like so. The top wishbone is much the same as the bottom one, but the only exception being that I created a mount for the spring to go on, and then cut several holes in it so that I can adjust the height of the suspension. I've got infinite adjustment basically. the spring will go on like that, and then ultimately this is kind of what you have. If you add the drive shafts back into the mix, this is ultimately what you end up with. So the axle is going to be split into two halves, and they're going to be controlled, or the drive through the two halves are going to be controlled by this, which is something I knocked up, which is basically consists of a couple of pieces of tube. On one side the tube is slotted, and then the outer tube has got drilled with some pins in it so that they locate in the grooves, which stop the outer sleeve from actually spinning around. So in essence it locks it, and the other side is just bolted to it's going to be pinned to the other half of the drive shaft, and then the same inner tube bolted to the axle, and then the outer one also welded so that it basically can't go anywhere, and then the two go together like so, and then when requested I'm going to make an arm that slides in and essentially locks the two halves together, and then when we want to disengage that, pull that back, and then the two parts work independently. Unfortunately the sound didn't come out on this clip, but basically this is the frame that I knocked together for the to mount the drive shafts and the suspension. And remember, this is just the back of the Go Kart only at this stage still, so I'm now just going to mount the components and let you see the finished result. This is all assembled by tightening up the nuts and bolts. The centre axle works pretty well, so obviously this is without any kind of lock in place. The idea being is that as soon as you lock that across, the axle becomes part of. So it becomes one. Lock it out. We'll see how it works in reality, but at the moment, alright. So that's going to be it for the first video. Next video will be me mounting the motor assembly here, the centre section for the seat and all the controls, steering column, all that part will be going sort of here, and I don't actually have a clue what that's going to look like yet, but bear with. Now, if you did find this interesting, give it a like. If you're interested to see how the next video goes, potentially consider subscribing, and in any case, thanks for watching.